Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. After his mother's words, he realized that expecting her to understand and expecting her to be sorry was foolish. He wished she would forgive him. He wished she would soften just a little so that he would be forgiven. But she wasn't going to soften, and she wasn't going to let what he'd done pass. That if I called Lisa, she'd give up on me too. I just wanted to live a beautiful life, and you decided that was a reason for you to give up on me, he asked. The mother took a deep breath. Apparently it was hard for her to talk to him about it, but she had to tell him everything at once. You spit on another human being. You spit in the soul of a poor girl, taking advantage of her low self-esteem. And you didn't give a damn about how she felt at the time. Now you're in her shoes. Now no one else cares how you feel. Are you okay with being treated that way? The mother asked. He just left. He was sick of being told what to do. He was sick of everything. He was terribly annoyed that his mother said things like that. He hoped that she would be happy that he had come, but she was not happy and did not want to host him. When he went downstairs, he immediately saw a dark automobile. One of the ones that had been following him as they drove towards the airport. And now there was only one thing left to do to face all these problems alone and talk to the girl's father, because there is simply no other way out. But come on, what is it this time? He asked grudgingly, walking to the car. He thought that he would get out of the car, but the girl's father came out to meet him. David spoke to him through his teeth. You could tell he was having a hard time keeping it together. And you thought you'd be welcomed with open arms. You know, Sebastian, if it wasn't for my daughter, I'd just leave you in the Dan River. I even had your mistress contact me. Swore she had nothing to do with it. Apologized. And you didn't even bother to call me. Couldn't even talk to me because you were a coward. Real rotten, the man said. One would think you got all that money through honest labor. Sebastian said also through his teeth. And you shouldn't care at all how I got that money. I spent 14 years working, plowing, hoping to get out of poverty. I wanted to give my daughter everything. But then you show up and destroy her faith and love. Freaks like you should be put on a stake and put stakes on the way out of town, so that the rest of us will not be like you, said the man. Sebastian took an involuntary step back. He did not like this man's plans at all. And she says, you won't let me work. Do you want me to starve to death without money? Or do you want me to sit on my mother's neck? Thank my mommy and my sister for playing the noble. If they had kept their mouths shut, your daughter would never have learned anything like that, Sebastian said. What kind of asshole are you? Well, I promised my daughter I'd let you live. Go on living, but know that sooner or later I may decide that I don't have to listen to my daughter's opinion in this matter, said David. Then he got into the car. He jerked the car forward sharply, and Sebastian bounced to the side. He was just terrified he was going to get run over. He clutched at his heart, scrambled backward, crawled away, and saw David's face contorted into a pleased grin. Sebastian hated him in that moment, but realized he deserved to be treated like that. David left. Sebastian tried one more time to talk to his wife, but she wouldn't even talk to him, let alone listen and build a relationship. He tried to talk to his mother, but her mother did not welcome him either, and just decided that if he had done it once, he could do it to anyone again. As it turned out, she no longer believed that Sebastian could be a good person. Sebastian repeatedly tried to get a job. In fact, the whole time he wasn't working, he was just lying about the job to give himself more importance. So it's not surprising that he never got hired without any experience. Apparently, David put a lot of effort into keeping him unemployed. The last thing Sebastian did was go to his sister's house, but his sister's husband kicked him out, wouldn't even let him talk to Lisa. Sebastian had no choice but to pack his things and just leave, try his luck in another city. I hope that there he will have a chance to establish his own life and not be afraid of being caught by the tail. Sebastian stood outside the entryway, smoking nervously. Today he was supposed to tell his mother about his fiancé's upcoming wedding, but he had a gut feeling that the conversation wouldn't end well. His mother rarely ever chose not to take his side, but in the case of marriage, it could easily turn out that his mother would not consider his opinion at all. She thought it was too soon for him to get married, and in general, that it shouldn't have bothered him until he was 30. Sebastian himself didn't really want to get married, but he had a plan, and this plan had to be followed strictly. Otherwise, he would work as a loader or laborer for the rest of his life, or until his body parts fall off, tired from physical labor. He couldn't make up his mind to go into the entryway. Once he got in, up the stairs, there would be no turning back. And so much he did not want to go to his mother now, that he even had the thought of letting her go right now and telling his mother about everything sometime later. But mother was a very touchy person, and he knew that if he did not tell her now, and she suddenly found out about everything later, she would be very much offended. And to have someone like Miranda as an enemy was costly. Choosing the lesser of two evils, he gathered courage, spit on the asphalt, threw the cigarette butt into a small trash can. He entered the entranceway, climbed the stairs, literally jumping over several steps. "Oh, Sonny," exclaimed Miranda, who was very happy to see her son. She did not know that Sebastian had come to tell her that he had decided to start a new family. And all this time, he had been hiding the fact that he was in a relationship. She smiled languidly, literally bouncing around him. And he, realizing that sooner or later his mother would find out about everything, smiled crookedly, trying to hide his true emotions, among which was fear. Regardless of how his mother would react, he would have to take this step, because otherwise his plan would be unrealized. And who knows when he'll ever get that opportunity again. Maybe never. "You sit at the table. I just finished cooking. I wish you'd said you were coming," Miranda said, starting to set the table to once again please her son, whom she missed so much. He was now a rare guest at her house, and she tried to show him that he was welcome here. "I have come to you with news," he said, stretching his wide mouth into a smile. Sebastian was not handsome at all. He had a blocky build, short in stature. His facial features were large. Perhaps he could even be called handsome, but managed a slight hump from a fracture. As a child, his lips were naturally plump and his mouth was wide. His eyebrows and eyelashes were light-colored, and at a certain angle it looked like they weren't there. Sebastian popped homemade cookies into his mouth, watched his mother fussing, and thought he would like a wife like this, one who ran around, fussed over him cooking, fulfilling his every whim. But at the same time, he could find more interesting entertainments on the side, knowing that his wife would forgive him if everything came to the surface. "I've got a little news," Sebastian said. And then he hesitated. The woman looked at him with interest at her son, but apparently tried not to react to him in any way. Maybe because she didn't want to know any news, or maybe because she had already guessed what he would tell her. Though he wouldn't have guessed it himself if he were in her shoes. He was hardly what you'd call a womanizer, so she was more likely to think about work, moving, anything, but certainly not a wedding reception. "Well, tell me if you've got news. I don't think I'm going to be very happy about it." "Yeah, if there was something happy, he would have told me right away," said Miranda, who knew him like the back of her hand. Sebastian hesitated. Mother was right. If the news was good, he would have told me over the phone, not wanting to drive to the other side of town. And he was getting married. "The date's already set, so I'm not changing anything," he said. In his mind, the phrase sounded insistent and firm. But when he spoke, there was no trace of it. His voice trembled at the most crucial moment, when it seemed he should have announced to his mother that he was to be married. Instead, he practically prolonged the information like a frightened child. "Is that a joke now, or what? Why, kids nowadays don't have to ask their parents' blessing anymore, no. Or how do you have it now? Your sister, when she was getting married, she told me everything. And when they first met, and when he proposed, everything was as it should be, you know. And you've got it all out of whack," Miranda said in a disgruntled voice, who didn't approve of her son hiding his own attitude from her for too long. But I knew you didn't approve. So no surprise, said Sebastian, rolling his eyes. There was silence. It was hard for the woman to accept the fact that her son was simply hiding his relationship from her. And instead of sharing this joy with his mother, had chosen to confront her with the fact. She didn't expect him to. She considered it an insult. There was no point in arguing with her son because Sebastian didn't know how to apologize. Well, if you've decided to get married, since your mother's opinion is completely irrelevant to you, said the woman. Only shook his head negatively. Mom, stop it. That's why I didn't tell you anything. Really? Enough of that when Micah is coming there? Asked he, wanting to change the subject to his sister. She's supposed to arrive today. Any minute now, she'll probably be happy to hear that you've kept your whole family out of your own future. So, is she really worth it to do this to us? I don't know, son. I didn't expect this from you. Have I ever said a bad word to you? Well, sometimes we fought, but everybody fights. We all do. But that's no reason to just take me out of your life. The woman said in a disgruntled voice, deciding to shame her son. But there was no shame on Sebastian's face, and he didn't care. He had done his job. He said everything and let the mother deal with her own emotions. He had a plan, and if he didn't stick to it, he would soon be left with empty pockets. The door opened, and his sister's disgruntled voice was heard. Lisa, walking into the apartment, was always indignant because, as always, she bumped into both of them and her brother. It was a situation they had had since childhood. But now her grumbling was courtly, and upon seeing her brother, she immediately rushed to hug him. So you knew I'd find you here, cunning bug. How did you know I was coming today? She asked, hugging her brother. Unlike her brother, Lisa had inherited the best features of her parents. She was short, slender, possessed light blue eyes, thick chestnut hair. She had correct facial features. Her appearance was pleasant. If, looking at her brother, one could guess about his unlikable character, her appearance spoke eloquently that she was a kind, sympathetic, good person. Looking at Lisa Sebastian at the same time, it was very difficult to believe that they were brother and sister. Can you imagine? He was going to get married. And he didn't tell us anything. He knew we'd react badly, you see. The older woman said in a disgruntled voice, deciding to tell her daughter at once how cruel Sebastian had been to them. Miranda looked so disgruntled that it was embarrassing to even look at her. She looked at her son, shaking her head, pressing her lips together. Something. I think this is all a bit too much, said Lisa, looking at her brother. Did you really go out with someone and not even bother to tell us? Are we strangers to you? Lisa never hid her emotions, and now she looked as upset as she could possibly be. She really hadn't expected her brother to be so cruel to her, and she wasn't happy that she told him everything at the time, and even things she shouldn't have told him. She had been the first to tell him that her husband had proposed to her. She was the first to tell him that they would soon be husband and wife, and it turned out that her brother, in order to repay her for her gullibility, simply decided to hide from her the whole relationship. Why are you two reacting like this? It's my life. I can marry or not marry. What's the problem? Sebastian exclaimed unhappily. He really didn't want to discuss or talk about anything right now, and he thought that even this notification to his relatives was more than enough. Sebastian could not tell that his secrecy was due to the fact that he feared his mother's reaction. He wanted to marry the daughter of an oligarch with a disability for the sake of money, but he was afraid that his mother might reveal his true character in front of his future wife. In front of Kelly, Sebastian was always so romantic, wonderful, as if it was all that mattered to him. But in reality, it was acting, and his mother would bite right back. That there was no sincerity in those words. Okay, I'm sorry for bringing you into my life. Next time, it will be a lesson to me that you should not trust me, Lisa said grudgingly, crossing her arms over her chest. Oh, let's get offended at me for nothing, he said grudgingly, his face expressing anger rather than annoyance. And I don't think you care about me at all. I'm your own sister. Well, I didn't tell my mother. I was worried. "But what's wrong with me?" Lisa asked. Sebastian from her only waved away the woman who stood in the kitchen, and now, closed on a chair, sat down with the children at the table. Had rather contradictory feelings. On the one hand, it was, of course, joyful in her soul that she was finally near her children. She should have been happy that they were sitting together, chatting, that they were doing well. But all she could think about was that her son had betrayed her, and that this betrayal did not suit her at all. He should have told her. She should have been aware of what was going on in his life. And he just ignored her. Okay, let's just let it go. Seriously, let's just let it go. At least she's a nice girl. Lisa asked, not wanting to exacerbate her relationship with her brother, who was becoming more and more distant lately. They used to be close as brother and sister, spending a lot of time together and never being strangers to each other. Now it turns out he's been a stranger to her for a long time. Yeah, but she doesn't have an arm. She has a prosthetic. I just didn't think you'd like it. Well, now that it's all out in the open, I've decided to marry her. I asked her to marry me, but she doesn't want a wedding. Maybe we'll have a quiet celebration, or maybe we'll just sign the whole thing, Sebastian said, picking at his plate. So it's not enough that you didn't say anything to your family, but now it turns out that you'll see or you won't organize any celebration for us at all. Disgruntled mother asked. I didn't expect that. I don't know anything about you. I thought I had really raised good children. Turns out the son has turned into a rat. Like in Cinderella, remember when the carriage turned into a pumpkin? So do you, but just an obnoxious, snarling animal. Sebastian rolled his eyes. And if the mother holds a grudge, then everyone will have to watch her dramatize it now. And how she put on daily demonstrations that were in lieu of punishments. Lisa immediately rolled her eyes at her mother's words this time, because she knew that her mother would stop at nothing now and would constantly hurt Sebastian for months to come until the resentment inside her melted away. Mom, are you going to keep resenting him? That's enough. Whatever he wants to do, let him do it. He's an adult. And besides, I think he's sorry he did that to us, Lisa said, wanting to resolve the situation. But Sebastian wasn't sorry, although he nodded. Apparently, he wanted to pretend that he really felt regret. Your father would be very disappointed in you, the mother said, as the children were on their way out to the balcony. Sebastian was angry with his mother. He hated it when she said that. But she knew it and was sure to take advantage of it. When they were alone on the balcony, he exhaled, because it was much easier to talk to his sister than it was to listen to his mother, who was always arguing and fighting with him over nothing. Really, he could have said something to his mother. Now you'll be hearing from her for years. All these complaints until she's had enough, Lisa said. And then you'll hear her say she doesn't want a daughter-in-law like that. But now he's put her on the spot. If she doesn't want it, she'll have to accept it, the man said. He tried to make it look like he was only doing it for his future wife. He was afraid her mother wouldn't accept the bride. From the outside, it looked like he was all noble, a little confused kid, and the mother is all evil woman who could easily not accept a disabled person in the family. Although there was never any such conversation. If I were you, I'd bring her in and introduce her to her mother properly. Don't you know our mother? She won't say anything like that. Yes, she's not an easy person, but she has no prejudices. All she cares about is that you're happy. And also, of course, that you let her know about your happiness at least once in a while. If we leave now, she'll cry again that she did something wrong in your upbringing. Since you've insulted her so much, Lisa said, what's done is done, and I can't take it back. Well, I have to go. How long are you here for? Asked Sebastian. Even though his relationship with his sister had grown cold lately, he would like to spend some more time with her. I'll be here till the end of the week, and then I'll only come in a month and a half, maybe 2. Don't worry, and I'll see you again. You don't run away from me that easily, she said with a smile. And he smiled at her too. When he went into the kitchen, where his mother was, she was much calmer, but it was obvious on her face that she was still resentful. He poked her in the forehead and then left the apartment. When he looked at his watch, it appeared that he had spent several hours there. To him, however, it seemed like an eternity had passed. But the most important thing was already behind him. And so, it was possible to continue to proceed to the realization of the plan. He called his fiancée, arranged a meeting with her, and his thoughts were constantly wandering. He thought about his mother, about the plan that could collapse at any minute, and about all the complications that surrounded him, but by no means stabbed him. He had spent so much time lately on the realization of his plan that he had completely forgotten about all the things that surrounded him. Mistress debts, the eternal problems at work, a back that ached for, flowed down into his lower back area, and at times prevented him from even living normally. He was so tired of it all, so eager for it all to be over that he didn't want to discuss anything with his mother. "Hey, Bunny, how are you feeling?" he asked, walking into his fiancée's room. She looked miserable, tortured, tired. Her eyes were slick with sleepiness, but she was smiling at him, just tired from all the medication. "The doctor says they'll probably discharge you tonight, but don't worry. I know you have a job. My dad will pick me up," she said with a smile. He looked at her and could not believe that he had been given such a great chance to arrange everything in his life. And everything was going to work out so perfectly. And she had fallen for him like a little child. And he could have taken full advantage of it. But nothing. "Did the doctor say anything else?" "There won't be any complications. Everything went fine," he said, trying to express an interest that wasn't really there. He'd be glad if there were any more health problems to add to her disability. And then she'd be nowhere near him. Her father would see him as a savior for taking all that responsibility off of him. "No, it's okay. I said I need nursing to look after me for a few weeks while they give me my meds. But all in all, it's fine. Oh, and besides, the doctor says that when he put the new denture in, the discomfort will go away and I'll feel much better already," she said with a smile. She looked at him with absolutely loving eyes and literally couldn't tear herself away from him. She glowed whenever he was near her. He thought that was a plus. After all, the more she fell in love with him, the more control he had over her. "I told my mother today that you and I are getting married. My sister was there too. I can't say they're thrilled, but trust me, it won't affect my decision in any way," he said. Again in this situation, he looked like a victim, an unhappy man who has to put up with his family's attitude toward his fiancée. He had secured himself on all sides in case his plan came to the surface. He had to weave a whole web of lies to give himself a head start in case it got out before the wedding. "I think you should have said something earlier. Maybe they'd have taken it easier. Besides, I'm not a bad person, and if I were completely offended, I might still understand. But I'm just missing an arm. And with a new prosthesis, I'll feel much better," she said. He just smiled. Apparently, he didn't want to tell her anything more. He decided to change the subject and was glowing with fake happiness. To look so happy, he wasn't thinking about the wedding or his fiancée. He was thinking about all the money that would belong to him when he finally took her as his wife, and when his father, the oligarch, would already be forced to accept him as kin and take him into his business. Sebastian did not yet suspect that such plans were not even close. From a man who completely disapproved of his daughter's choice and overstepped his infinite patience. Every time he met Sebastian, "Soon you and I will be married. Things will be different. I've been waiting for this for so long, so long. I wanted to make it official." You see, he spoke in dry, standardized sentences, but since she was in love with him, she didn't notice all these changes. "Couldn't you at least introduce me to your sister?" she asked him. But he immediately shook his head negatively. "Believe me, it could be much worse than my mother. When the time comes, I'll introduce you to them all. But for now, it's best not to take any chances, you understand?" he asked gently, taking her hand. She didn't understand why he didn't want her to meet her family, but she assumed he did. It was only to keep her safe for herself. It hadn't even occurred to her what he was doing. This is purely to keep his disgusting plan from being discovered. For the time being. Maybe when a few months or maybe years have passed since their marriage. It would get to her, but not now. He sat with her in the room, talking about how much he loved her and how he wished he could be with her. She smiled, held his hand, and thought about how very lucky she was. From the outside, they looked like the truest of happy couples. But if only someone knew what was really going on in his soul. When David arrived at the hospital to pick up his daughter, Sebastian wasn't there. Sebastian had left early on purpose. He didn't want to meet a man who didn't really approve of him. David looked tired, tortured. Apparently, he had enough problems at work. He looked at his watch. He went straight to the doctor's office to talk about his daughter, whose prosthesis he had promised her cost a decent amount of money, but he didn't care about the money. He just wanted her to finally be able to replace the old one and be able to forget what a nightmare she'd been through. "But let's go home," David said with a smile as he walked into his daughter's room. "Wow, I thought you'd be here in a couple hours," Kelly said, totally happy that he'd come to get her early. "That your boyfriend was coming, for God's sake, daughter. But couldn't you have picked a normal guy? This is a nightmare, a real one. You can tell he's cheating on you. But of course you won't listen to me. And if I forbid this wedding, it won't stop you. But I will be your #1 enemy," said David, who was tired of convincing his daughter that she was choosing the wrong man for her life. "I'm glad you support me. I may be wrong. I may realize in a few years that he's not the right man. I'll take my own bumps, you know," she said with a smile. He smiled too, but there was absolutely no sincerity in that smile. If it were up to him, he would have put this man in a bag, taken him out of town, dumped him in the dumps so no one would find him there. So well, David knew people literally through and through saw that the man who sucked on her daughter like a tick clearly wants to get only money, and on the girl himself he does not care. But he didn't want to fight with his daughter. It was better to endure a little now, and then just help his daughter recover. He helped her out of bed. Tomorrow they would have to come to the fitting of the new prosthesis. In the meantime, they couldn't even wear the old ones. She was used to using both hands. And now, left with one hand, it was uncomfortable. Awkwardly, she got into the car. He buckled her seatbelt, sat in the driver's seat himself. He looked at his daughter. However, he was very worried about her condition. "Daddy, you should get over it by now. He really loves me very much. Very much. Yeah, I'd never seen such love in my life. Only in movies, you know. I just want to be loved, whether I have an arm or not. Yeah, he even fights with his family. And it's all just so he and I can be happy," she said. David nodded. He drove the car toward the house. He looked upset. But as they say, he had no choice. Since he had decided not to spoil his relationship with his daughter, he would have to put up with not only her love stories, but also the very man he couldn't stand and had quickly removed from the family. During this time, Sebastian was having fun at his mistress's house. Cindy, having gotten from him what she had been waiting for, finally lay on the bed and thought only about how lucky she was to have him and how she would get all the money he would get from him and just send him away and never contact such a man again, who clearly felt his own superiority, but did not do a damn thing for it. He annoyed her. She had some conflicting, unpleasant feelings about him, but she forced herself to smile, to pretend she was in love with him. It was like everything was exactly the same as Sebastian and Kelly, only in reverse. And Sebastian was acting just like Kelly. He fell in love with this girl. He forgave her everything and couldn't even think that her feelings weren't real. "I want to go to the sea," Cindy said, sitting on top of him. And he laughed. It always amused him when she spoke loudly, cheerfully, like a child who had gotten something in his head and now wanted it, not caring how he got what he wanted. "Wait a minute. I'm gonna get married. I'll pretend to go on business trips, and I'll go to the sea with you. Now we'll soon have so much money that we'll never need anything again. I'll live with her for a year. I'll file for divorce. I'll make such a fuss that she herself wants to give me everything, just to get away from her," said Sebastian, totally happy. He had an amazing plan in his head. However, the more he thought about what his plan was and what the outcome should be, the more he saw holes in the plan. And while everything seemed perfect at first, as time went on, the reality of his plan also came into question. "Aren't you afraid that her father will figure it out?" Cindy asked, getting out of bed and going to the window. She always went to the window, completely naked, taking advantage of the fact that they were on the 12th floor, and she didn't care if someone else from the same 12th floor could see her. She wasn't self-conscious about her body. She was rather proud of her body. "I think he knows all about it," said the man, turning so that he could see her and enjoy the view he had from behind. "If he had a clue, he'd probably tell her not to marry you," said Cindy, leaning forward to get a good look at what was going on down there. People were walking back and forth. No one really cared what was unfolding here. In fact, Cindy just wanted to do anything to spend as little time as possible with her lover by her side, even when she had him. The longer they were in the relationship, the nastier she felt every time he came, every time he grabbed her with his hands, and she wanted to spend hours in the shower afterward just to wash away that nasty feeling. Yeah, the thing is, he already told her. "I've got her so brainwashed. She'll believe anything I say. But she won't serve her father. You should hear the dithyrambs I sing to her. And love like in the old movies. She gets all swollen and thinks I love her that much. God, how stupid are women," he said. He put his hands behind his head. At that moment, Cindy thought that there are some men who believe in any ahs and sighs from the mistress and piously believe that it is the very thing that is love. She spun him in a matter of days. She immediately got into his plan, and he suspected nothing, but at the same time considered stupid a completely different woman. "When I think about how much money I'll have when I'm inbred with this oligarch, does it take your breath away?" said Sebastian. "All my life, I've worked hard physically. I thought I'd do it all myself, make money, and now I'm just getting by. What do I do? Pretend I'm all lovey-dovey, romantic, wonderful. You could go to an acting course and teach, by God." He laughed, and she smiled, but she thought it was going too well, and that obviously it wouldn't last. "You need to get married as soon as possible, because she might get suspicious. Just one doubt can ruin it." The mistress said it all, looking at him much more seriously. He propped himself up on an elbow, looking at her. Cindy was now spinning around near the mirror. She walked over to him, sat down on top of him, and he took her thighs with his palms. He couldn't believe that such a beautiful woman reciprocated him. "Yeah, I know. And so everyone speeds up as fast as I can. But sometimes I feel like fate itself is already against me," Sebastian said grudgingly. "I told him about my mother, because there's nowhere else to go. She took offense to the whole thing, started some kindergarten. It's good that my sister came. At least she supports me," he said. But the talk about her sister did not please Cindy at all. She didn't trust Lisa. And from what Sebastian had told her, Lisa was the one who could get in his way. And if she found out what he was really up to, she was the kind of person who believed in justice and who was willing to fight for it. Where's the justice in that? If his own brother wants to marry the daughter of an oligarch, ignoring her disability, and all this just to get her father's money, and then go to resorts with his mistress and not worry about anything. If I were you, I'd stay away from Lisa if she finds out what you're up to. Believe me, she obviously wouldn't approve, Cindy said. Yeah, I know I'm in a relationship with her, but I'm not a chatterbox either. I know Nick, could ruin everything for me overnight. I don't think that girl has any limits at all. If she wants something, she'll wake the dead if she has to, he said, shaking his head negatively. Make sure it goes quickly, without a hitch. The quicker it goes, the less trouble you might have. Don't have a wedding. Sign the papers, go on vacation, and you can tell her father. He didn't want to spend too much money. Would you rather go on vacation or save it for the baby? He'll just take it as you don't really need the money. Well, not an option, of course, if he already thinks you're a greedy predator. He listened to anyone, but tried not to pay much attention to what she was saying. The more she talked, the more he began to worry himself. And if he started to worry, he was getting himself worked up and could easily let his guard down. And then, when he had a chance to do what he wanted to do, he might pass out of fear. He had distracted her with another erotic game, but now he was only thinking about what he needed to do to keep himself safe and to speed up the whole marriage process. When Sebastian left his mother, Lisa stayed behind. She only came to visit her mother for a few days. But the news her brother had given her wasn't so easy to forget. "How long do you think this story will last?" Lisa asked her mother, seeing that her mother wanted to talk about it too. "I don't know. I think he's definitely hiding something from us. If there was nothing to it, I don't think he'd just make it up. I don't think he would hide her from us just because she has a prosthetic arm," Miranda said. She didn't believe her son. Now she believed he was hiding his fiancée from them for a reason. There's a reason. He doesn't want to play the wedding, and the whole thing looked suspicious at the very least. "I think it's gonna come out soon enough. And when we find out where the truth lies, it's not going to be as smooth as Lisa just said." Sebastian's always been acting strange lately. I can't remember a time when he was just like he used to be. Now he's always having thoughts, strange ideas, always having some sort of malfunction. Then again, he's hiding everything from us. "Do you think he's in trouble?" asked the mother. Lisa shrugged her shoulders. And even though she hadn't admitted it to her mother herself, she piously believed that he really was in trouble. If everything was fine, if there was no trouble, he would never leave her without information. He would tell her everything in advance. Even if he kept it from his mother, he would still tell her something. He could have told her he was seeing someone for starters, or at least hinted that he was getting a wife. But he didn't even bother to hint. And they talked on the phone quite a bit. But even on the phone, he didn't tell her anything. You know, more than anything, I'm afraid it's his problems that's going to hurt you. What's to hide? He's no good, and you love fixing things for him. Do you like to help him when he gets in over his head?" said the mother in a disgruntled voice. "I hope that if he gets into trouble this time, you'll be smart enough to stay out of it." Lisa shrugged her shoulders. She couldn't promise her mother that she just wouldn't do anything if her brother needed help. And how would she ignore him if he suddenly showed up and asked for her help? They talked into the evening, first in the kitchen, then in the living room. But when Sebastian came into the apartment that evening, a drunken Lisa could see in her mother's face that this was far from the first time this had happened. Who knows why he came in tipsy? What exactly was he celebrating, good or bad things that had happened in his life? He wasn't drunk, but he was pretty drunk. As much as it allowed him to loosen up, he spoke fluently. Sometimes he could read the language. But he looked almost like a sober man. But there was anxiety on his face, and it was impossible to hide it. "But while your mother is away, why don't you tell me what's wrong?" Lisa asked, deciding to give her brother a real interrogation. And while the mother decided to go to the neighbor, she took advantage of the moment. "You need to know everything, don't you?" asked Sebastian, clearly pissed off. "Yes, I need to know why the hell my brother keeps such important things from me," exclaimed Lisa. She was still outraged that he hadn't told her about the upcoming wedding. She was also outraged that he hadn't even tried to apologize. It felt like everything was going the way he'd originally intended. "Look, but if you don't tell your mother, I'll tell you straight up. She's got a very rich father. He's got a lot of money to burn. And his daughter is an invalid. I don't think anyone's gonna look at her. He'll be glad of it himself. If anyone will marry her, believe me," said Sebastian, and his face turned nasty and courtly. "Are you saying that my brother, who always condemned everyone for being mercantile, decided to marry for money?" asked Lisa, not believing her own ears. But it turns out that he was so tired of everything. "All my life I worked physically for money, and here at least there will be some result. All the more it is not difficult for me to pour into her ears how I love her, how we have with her everything will be fine. Nothing will happen to her if suddenly she just becomes my wife, said Sebastian. A girl's dream will be fulfilled. She will end up married. But I'll be able to live a normal life and never worry about money again. And then her dad will put me in his business and I'll be blown away. Lisa looked at Sebastian. She couldn't believe her brother was acting like this. She didn't realize whether she was looking at him or at a complete stranger. They had grown up together, spent so much time together. Who would have thought he could change so drastically? But Sebastian had been drinking heavily and saw absolutely nothing wrong in his actions at all. "Are you a saint?" Sebastian asked. A wry grin appeared on his face. He wanted to show that he didn't feel guilty. In fact, he didn't feel any guilt at all. Lisa knew that in such a state of mind, he could easily unleash his tongue. But if she had known what he would say, she probably would not have asked the question, because it was too strange. She couldn't believe he was capable of such a thing, and certainly couldn't believe he could deceive another person so easily. And it was all just for the money. "Okay, look, you promised your mom you wouldn't say anything. She's got a big mouth. She'll give me away. And then she'll get to the mistress," Sebastian said, not realizing that he had just given himself away. He slowly got up from the table, staggered a little, went into the living room, and there, having once again knocked over a stool, went to his room. Now Lisa was generally confused. She knew about the mistress, and that he was only doing all this for money. She couldn't believe it was her brother. It was more like some stranger had put on his skin. Naturally, she would not say anything to her mother, but she did not want to watch the moral decay of her brother. What if she found the bride and told her everything? What if she gave up her own brother? She couldn't decide anything yet. It was all stupid. She decided to put it all away in a far corner for now. After all, mother was right. Sebastian always had a joint, and she would deal with the consequences behind it. Let this time be different. When her mother came in, Lisa didn't say anything. She gave a smack but a peck on the cheek and went to the hotel where she was staying. She knew her mother liked to spend her evenings in solitude, so she did not prevent her. The elderly woman heard her son snoring in the other room. The woman felt tired from the constant nerves and from the fact that she was replaying in her head all that was happening now with her son. She was afraid that he was in trouble, that the wedding was just a cover-up. Miranda sat in her room. She was reading a book, quietly listening to music on one earphone. The light instrumental music was a complement to the book she was reading. But when she heard her son leave the room, she pulled the earphone out on automatic, as if she wanted to hear if he suddenly called out to her. But what she heard was her son talking on the phone. She realized almost immediately that he was talking to his mistress. "Yeah, don't worry, it'll be fine. What am I? 5 years old. You don't think I can handle it on my own?" He said after they exchanged romantic pleasantries. "I told you not to go there. You'll be hooked. Before you know it, you'll be making excuses for what you said," Cindy said. Sebastian sat on the balcony, talking on speakerphone, not even realizing that his mother's window was open for ventilation. When Sebastian addressed his mistress by name, the woman knew immediately that there was something more connecting them. She was already aware that her son's fiancé's name was Kelly, and she was no Cindy. The older woman tiptoed closer to the window so as not to make a sound. She wanted to hear every word. "Look, you and I have talked it over, but if you put me down, if you mess up my plans, believe me, I'll make sure you get what you deserve," the woman on the other end of the line said. "And you always get what you want. That's the way I like you. Look, I'll come see you tomorrow. So do me a favor and keep your attitude," he said in a single voice that made her mother cringe. She couldn't believe she'd raised such a man, and she was disgusted that he was acting like this. They talked again about something romantic and luscious. The woman didn't want to hear it. But now she knew her son had a mistress. Things had gotten too twisted. She had to figure it out for herself. Miranda was the kind of person who never left a situation without her intervention. If there was an opportunity to stick her nose in, she was sure to stick it in. and in a situation where her son had found a mistress, but was hiding his fiancée who he was supposed to marry any day now. It was already something supernatural to her. At first she was angry, but then she decided that the more cold-blooded she was, the better, the more opportunity she had to catch her own son and find out what he was really hiding. The wedding was already the other day. Things will be easier from here on out. The most important thing is that before the wedding she did not suspect anything. And then I'll take all her assets off her hands, Sebastian said. Don't go to your mother's or your sister's until you're married. If they catch you in one place, we won't get out of it, Cindy said. Miranda immediately realized that her son was on the hook and that there was simply nothing he could do against this woman. Apparently, she had been spinning him, and now she wanted her piece of the pie too. Come to my place now. No more hanging around, she said, and she had a pretty serious statement to make. She spoke in a tone that brooked no objection. But if you promise me to do what you did yesterday, I might come, he said. And then he smiled, and you could hear it in his voice. Why the hell are you making everything horizontal? Come, we need to talk. Stop sitting there. You don't realize that the longer you stay around your mother and sister, the more you put yourself in danger, Cindy said. And she was already speaking so insistently that he didn't bother to contradict her. When the woman came out into the kitchen, the son was already coming into the room. He smiled at his mother, looked at her as if he expected to see her face. Did she even hear anything? But he immediately brushed it off piously, certain that she had heard absolutely nothing. He was overly confident that everything would go perfectly, completely unafraid or worried about anything. Mom, I have to go to work. So I'm going to take a shower and then I'll be on my way. No offense, he said. It still threatened to make him smell like booze. He put his phone on charge and went to take a shower, and while he was gone, Miranda transcribed her mistress's phone number to herself and took a picture on her phone at the same time, her photos to the messengers. She almost immediately sent it all to her daughter, immediately signed it. Who is this? And stepped away. She grabbed a towel and sat down on the couch, as if she was waiting for her turn to shower and then go to bed. She tried to look innocent, unaware, smiling at her son, trying to look at him with the same loving eyes he always did. Sebastian walked out, and then again told his mother goodbye, that he was leaving for work, and left the apartment. And now Miranda was left alone in the apartment. She was going over in her head all the things her son had said. Did he really have a mistress? Could this wedding be prevented? Would this girl believe them? It was all strange. And it seemed that even if they told her everything, she wouldn't believe them. One could only hope that Lisa, who was now aware of the situation, would be able to handle it herself. First, her mother had accused her of dealing with her brother's problems, and now she was suggesting that she get involved in new stories again. But Lisa didn't mind. She wanted to find Cindy and talk to her. Maybe she could prove that she wasn't the right person to cling to. But time was running out. The wedding had already taken place. Sebastian announced it when he arrived home. Apparently, he wasn't going to let his mother and sister into his life any further, and they didn't expect him to. Sebastian was perfectly happy. The wedding was over, and he was sure that no one would be able to oppose him. All he had to do was arrange with his mistress to wait another year, but she wasn't going to wait. Cindy started throwing tantrums almost every day, demanding that he come up with a plan to get the money faster. But he already had one plan, and he wasn't going to make another one up. It wasn't until a month after the wedding that Lisa managed to find Cindy after her mother texted her a picture of her phone number. A lot of effort had to be put in, and quite a few acquaintances had to be enlisted to help in the search. The only thing left was to find her whereabouts, her job, her home, anything where she could be reached, because obviously she wouldn't talk on the phone. Lisa found the house, but when she saw not only her mistress there, but also her brother, she realized she couldn't do anything. She wanted to remain inconspicuous for now, until this situation was blackened. It was necessary to remain neutral. I'm already tired. I can't do this. Why does she have to be your wife? And I just have to watch you sleep with her, Cindy said in a disgruntled voice. She crossed her arms across her chest. Her thin eyebrows looked tense. Her whole face turned to stone. I've already told you. Yes, I told you right away that I want to take this situation to its logical conclusion. If I go off the rails right now and get a divorce, I'll get nothing at all. Stupid. If you knew how hard I worked to get her out, you wouldn't be talking like this right now. I'm trying for us, by the way, he said. Lisa looked at her brother and couldn't believe it was her own man. She didn't know the scumbag, even though outwardly he was one and the same as her brother. Or maybe she didn't know him as a person at all. But it was Cindy's cry that snapped her out of her thoughts. Why the hell should I encourage you to sleep with another woman? Maybe you like her at all, and you're just taking advantage of me, she screamed. He grabbed her arm, moved her to his side, and started to say something very quietly. Lisa didn't hear a single word, and besides, she tried to write everything down. It was a shame that the last phrases would remain unknown. She had already collected enough evidence to show to the unfortunate girl who did not know what kind of a freak she had chosen as a husband. Cindy, after the words he had spoken to her, sat down on the pipe. She had lowered her head low. He was bringing her to his place. I really only love you, and I only want you. But I've got to do all this. You see, if I don't do all this, you and I will remain beggars. All I want from her is money. Preferably all her father's money. And then what happens? All I gotta do is find some fool from his job who's willing to make it happen, you know. He said. She nodded. And then you get all your money. And I'll be left with empty pockets. I who have put up with you, waited, spent all my youth on you, Cindy exclaimed. And I could hear in her voice that she was almost crying. Well, do you want me to put it on your account first? Do you want to? Please don't cry. I can't bear to see you cry. I really only love you, and this invalid is only in it for the money, said Sebastian. Lisa couldn't hear it anymore. She turned around abruptly and walked towards the car she had left a block away. She wanted to keep herself safe. Apparently, she hoped she could make a deal with his mistress so she wouldn't get involved in the relationship. So she'd leave them all alone. It was already clear that no amount of persuasion would work. When Lisa got into the car, she was faced with the question of whether to tell her mother. But it was foolish to leave her mother without information. It was the mother who overheard the conversation. She sent the pictures. She made it easy to get to the truth. And now Lisa would just hide it all from her. When the girl arrived at her mother's house, she showed her the video, as well as the pictures she had managed to take when she had followed up earlier. Miranda couldn't hold back the tears. It was a shame to realize that this was her son, her little boy, whom she loved so much, whom she believed in and hoped that she would raise a worthy man out of him. But it turned out that he didn't even look like a man. He was someone who easily deceived the feelings of others. What do you suggest? The mother-in-law will come to her daughter-in-law and tell her she's not a match, or that the mother-in-law should come and tell that her saintly son-in-law is cheating on his wife, asked Miranda, who, on the one hand, wanted to take revenge on her son, to teach him a lesson, but on the other hand, was afraid that so she would lose him and would not be able to establish a relationship with him. Do you want to leave it like that? You realize there's a girl out there, another person who's worried, who cares. The worst part is that she believes him unconditionally, Lisa said. The older woman shook her head. Her face was full of sadness. She wanted to teach her son a lesson, but she didn't know what she should do now, especially since she was completely shattered by the whole situation. I don't know. On the one hand, it would be nice to teach him a lesson so he'd finally understand. But on the other hand, I don't know. The mother was silent. Lisa knew that her mother would be worried that she wouldn't immediately agree on the spot, that it might take more than one day before she realized that they had no right to leave this girl without information. But Lisa was also certain that the mother would not leave this situation alone. Her keen sense of justice and experiences from the past would not allow her to do so. Miranda Fyodorovna promised her daughter to make a decision, but she could think of nothing. Lisa, who came to see her the next day, demanded an answer. Miranda sat pondering what was more precious to her, but at some point she realized she had an obligation to teach her son a lesson. If he hadn't internalized all these values she had instilled in him from early childhood, she would prove him wrong in practice. She herself had experienced betrayal from their father at one time or another, and so she didn't want another unfortunate girl to suffer. Okay, I've thought of something and I'll discuss it with you later. For now, we need to get everything ready. I'm really glad you said yes, even though I know it's hard for you right now. It really is, but he has to realize he's wrong. First, he married the daughter of an oligarch, ignoring her disability. And now what? Now he thinks he can use her without interference. Oh no, he's still my son, which means I have every right to teach him a lesson, said Miranda. Lisa already had a plan in her head, but in order to realize it, she had to think it over. She had to make arrangements with some people so that everything would go smoothly. But most importantly, she needed to go to Kelly, meet her and tell her the truth so that she would know that her husband was unfaithful to her. She needed to know that the only thing Sebastian was thinking about by marrying her was her father's money. The day that Lisa got ready to go to Kelly's house to tell her everything, she was very nervous. It couldn't be said that she had made up her mind several times at once. She even tried to force herself to take at least the first step. It was understandable that she had to tell everything, especially since she and her mother had decided that they could get revenge. But on the other hand, she realized that if she took that step, there would be no other way out. She'd lose her brother. She'd lose the chance to be with him and communicate with him. "Are you sure you've made up your mind?" asked her mother. But she herself was afraid that her daughter would refuse. Miranda had already strictly decided that she would teach her own son, but on the other hand, she could not do everything on her own. She came up with a plan on her own, completely canceled what the daughter had come up with. She wanted to teach her son a lesson on her own, but she couldn't do it all on her own without the daughter's interference. "Yeah, I've made up my mind. I know you're worried I'm gonna say no, but don't worry. I hope everything will be okay," Lisa said with a smile. She walked out of the house, got into her car, thinking that if she didn't come now, if she delayed coming to see her mother for at least a month, she wouldn't know what was going on here. Maybe she would only hear from her mother how her brother had simply refused to tell her about his fiancée and didn't want to introduce his wife afterward. And no one would have known that Sebastian had married the daughter of an oligarch with a disability for money. But since his mother-in-law overheard his conversation with his mistress, she decided to teach him a lesson. Lisa took out the car, drove slowly towards the house where no one is waiting for her. If she arrived, if this girl refused to talk to her, things could end badly. Lisa kept thinking about the fact that the girl just might not want to talk to her, even though she would provide her with all the evidence. Kelly could just say that she believed her husband, that it was all a setup or something, and it would mean that they couldn't teach him a lesson, and in doing so they would lose the trust of their family man for nothing. Lisa stopped outside the house, looking at it carefully, but hesitating to approach. Finally, she approached the house, called the intercom, and immediately the camera turned on. The girl answered that she would be right out, and in a few minutes she was on the doorstep. Kelly turned out to be quite pretty, a young pretty girl who didn't deserve to be treated like this. As Lisa looked at her, she realized that she just couldn't take not telling her anything. Kelly smiled, warmly greeted her, inviting her into the house. "I didn't think you'd come on your own. Your brother says that you don't want to take me in, but we hope that the time will come, and you will realize that I'm not a bad option," Kelly said in a soft, caring tone. And Lisa was even more upset, realizing that her brother had made it up on purpose. As they walked into the house, Lisa looked around. She had a strange feeling of foreboding, as if she had been here before. Of course, the premonition was wrong. It was just that it was such a feeling. "You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about why you guys don't want to take me in," Kelly started talking. But Lisa immediately interrupted her. "I'm sorry," Kelly, but I have to interrupt you. He's been lying to you this whole time. We didn't even know you existed. He told us a week before the wedding we didn't know who you were. Why would he hide you? It's only recently that it's come out why he's doing it. I'm sorry, Kelly, very sorry, but I can't let him keep lying to you all the time, Lisa said. Kelly looked seriously at the girl who had come to her house. She looked at the clock, as if she wanted to figure out how long before her husband would be home. And when Lisa provided her with the videotape, and then the pictures, it all became clear at once. Kelly watched the whole thing, hearing the horrible words spoken by the man she thought was her husband. And inside, everything clenched with pain. And the sensation was so repulsive that she could hardly stand it. Look, I understand how it hurts, and I understand how it looks, but I don't want you to believe him. Your mother-in-law. Sebastian's mother overheard him talking to his mistress, and that's when we decided we had to teach him a lesson. We need your help, Lisa said, still hoping the girl wouldn't kick her out of the house. Kelly looked at her and suddenly cried so bitterly that it hurt to even look at her. Lisa put her arms around her, pulling her close to her. Lisa didn't comfort her, gave her the opportunity, just drank properly. Who knows what else she would have to endure while they looked for an opportunity to get back at him. Lisa began to slowly tell her what plan she had come up with, trying to speak quietly, calmly, so as not to provoke more upset. When Kelly had calmed down a bit, it was safe to talk to her. Lisa tried to choose her words, but she could see from Kelly's face that she had already made up her mind. My father was right. He was right all along, and I trusted him, believed that he really loved me, Kelly said. Her face was focused, serious, but she wasn't crying, though tears sometimes still flowed involuntarily down her cheeks. I know it's awful, and I probably could never have gone through something like that myself. Really, I'm sorry that I was the person who brought you this news, but we've made up our minds. We're going to see him off whether you come with us on this or not. Kelly listened to the whole plan, and she was basically fine with it. But it was all forks in the water. Kelly suddenly decided that she was going to get her father involved. After all, her father had enough connections to teach this man a lesson. Kelly said nothing. A dumbfounded Lisa immediately called her father, and when David heard what had happened, he roared like a madman. He believed what was happening, even though it was hard to believe what had happened. He realized how hurt and scared his daughter was right now, but most of all, he wished they could get back at him. Kelly answered the phone. Lisa and Lisa explained everything, made it clear what they were willing to do now, and what their plan was. The man on the other end of the line agreed right away, said they could count on him. He was terribly angry, and it seemed that his anger was clearly not good for them right now. Sebastian drove home. He had spent a few hours at his mistress's completely happy, not thinking about anything bad. He had no idea that all the people he knew right now were coming up with a plan to teach him a lesson. Sebastian had a smile on his face. He felt insanely happy. Here he had spent time with his mistress, and now he was on his way home to his wife, where such coveted money was waiting for him. Kelly felt like she was falling apart. Sebastian, meanwhile, looked like a man who knew no discomfort. When he parked his car outside the house, he didn't even realize that only a few hours ago his sister's car had been parked there. He didn't realize that only a few hours ago his wife had spoken to Lisa, who had provided all the evidence of his cheating. All of this was unknown to him. Therefore, nothing seemed capable of ruining his mood. Sebastian walked into the courtyard, humming some silly song to himself, and couldn't stop, totally happy with what was going on. "How's it going?" Kelly asked, when he had already sat down at the table, and she was setting the table, trying to pretend that she was fine. However, it was obvious that she was worried about it on her face. "Well, it's okay. I'm going on a business trip, probably the day after tomorrow. I was wondering if I could borrow your dad's car, the one he gave you." "You don't drive," he said. Kelly smiled slightly, nodded. That was even better. It would make it clear which car he was driving and which way he was going, because that car is easily traceable. She wanted to offer him her father's car herself. But as it turns out, her husband was completely unaware that he was being set up. He was setting himself up. "Why are you so upset? Why don't you tell me? What happened?" he asked her, but she only smiled slightly. "My head hurts a lot. Probably from the medication. I went to the doctor and got all the tests back today. They said I should come back in a week. I'm just really tired." "It's okay," said Kelly, who had premeditated her answer so she wouldn't get caught and ruin the whole operation. Sebastian pulled her to him, sitting her on his lap. She was disgusted that he was acting like this. She was disgusted with him now and didn't even want to feel his touch on her. She hated him in these moments and wished he would leave this house and her life forever. "Are you upset that I'm going away on a business trip? Don't worry about it. I have a family to provide for. I don't want to have to sit on your father's back forever. He'll never respect me if all we do is take money from him. Listen, there's something else I wanted to say. Why don't you talk to your dad? I just thought it'd be nice if he took me into his business and told Sebastian, like, by the way, I'll talk to him, but don't expect a quick answer. You know very well what kind of father I have and what kind of temper he has. I hope it'll be all right, although I don't think he'll say yes right away. Why don't we wait a couple months?" Kelly asked, shrugging her shoulders and genuinely pretending she didn't realize he was just trying to screw her over. Sebastian nodded, smiling. It was obvious by the look on his face, however, that he was clearly upset. He pulled a smile over his face, and the look on his face was as if he was completely disappointed with her answer. He wanted to avoid pressuring her so as not to arouse suspicion, but he also didn't want to wait forever for handouts from her father. "Aren't you afraid that he'll turn me on in the meantime?" Sebastian asked, looking at his beloved in the hope that she would understand him and give in to his pressure. "No, I'm not afraid. Besides, you realize he's just worried about me. Well, that's just the way he is. It happens. I was thinking maybe you and I could go to your mother's, pick a day off. We'll see, right? What if she does accept me?" Kelly asked. "That's out of the question. I already went to my mother's house today and talked to her about it, but she threw a monster tantrum, like she likes to do. I'm really ashamed to have a mother like that. But I'm sorry, as it is. I'm sorry, darling, but I'll have to be patient. I know my mother well. I think in about 3 months, when she's cooled down, everything will be all right, and you'll be like her own daughter. And I won't have to listen to her all the time, that I made the wrong choice. But don't worry, she's not mad at you. She's more mad that I kept you from her," Sebastian said. "She can't get over the fact that I'm all grown up and don't need her endless tutelage." Kelly listened to him and realized how strange his words sounded. Too real, as if it were all true. Apparently, she even subconsciously tried to believe him, knowing full well what kind of man he was. Everything inside clenched at the feeling. "Well, I'll go to bed then. I need to get some sleep. Tomorrow, I'll have a very hard day. I have to buy everything for my business trip, buy tickets. I'm also going with a colleague. They assigned me some intern. I don't know, I might have to teach him everything," Sebastian said in a disgruntled voice. But Kelly already knew the grief she was talking about. She was disgusted that he continued to deceive her, and she continued to believe him or pretend to believe him. A few days passed, and now Sebastian was about to leave on a business trip. Kelly, even if Lisa had not said anything, she would have suspected that there was something wrong, because her lover decided not just to go on a business trip, but was going as if he was going to a resort. And she was angry with herself that all this time she was just waiting for him to change his attitude towards her. Right away, she should have put him in his place and trusted her father. Sebastian kissed his wife on the cheek, got into David's expensive car, and inside everything was literally glowing with pleasure. He had never driven such expensive cars. He thought it was a good sign. Now he would get behind the wheel, get out of the yard, and never leave this car again. He's gonna get Kelly to take his car, and he's gonna drive this car. He drives out of the yard and goes straight to his mistress. humming to himself. It was the same idiotic song. He wanted to laugh, to enjoy life. A little more, and he'd go away with his mistress, spend a whole week with her in some cool hotel, and not think about anything, just enjoy life. But most importantly, he had dulled the vigilance of his mistress, who was already sure that he was deceiving her, although he didn't even want to deceive her. She wanted money, she wanted a nice life, and he's gonna give her a test drive. Wow, that's quite a car. Cindy exclaimed cheerfully as she got into the front seat, her smile stretching literally from ear to ear. She looked so happy that she couldn't even calm her own emotions. She gave it to me without any trouble at all. Gullible fool, Sebastian said with a chuckle, not even realizing that the gullible fool he was talking about was calling her father right now and telling him that her husband had already left. But then we need to get a power of attorney right away. Then I'll have to register the car for myself. I don't think she's gonna trust you for too long. You're gonna turn yourself in somewhere, said Cindy. Again, she was worried, because she didn't believe that Sebastian would be able to make everything go smoothly. She was worried that she would be in trouble for his blunder. Cindy had already envisioned a beautiful life, hoped she would get it. But the longer she spent with her man, the more she realized that he could easily ruin it. Sebastian was too superficial, didn't realize that everything could change overnight. He saw his infallibility, and that Kelly loved him so much that she would never believe in his infidelity. Cindy, on the other hand, was convinced that anyone could change their attitude toward another person sooner or later. Oh, come on. It's like you don't trust me at all. Every time I listen to you, you tell me what I should do. I'll decide what I should do, he said in a disgruntled voice. She raised her palms conciliatorily, as if to show that she was backing down. But in fact, Cindy decided to slow down a little with her moralizing. She felt that his happiness would not last long, that sooner or later either Kelly or her father would realize that something was wrong. But Sebastian himself thought that he had drawn a lucky ticket in this life, and now it was safe to move on. Everything's gonna be okay. I've already talked to her about talking to her father about taking me into his business. You think she suspected anything? Already hung his own. She's looking at me with love eyes. He says we'll wait a month, and then tell him he's not going anywhere, Sebastian said, going over his wife's words. But he didn't care how truthful he would be. The important thing was that his mistress believed him. Cindy didn't believe him. It was written all over her face. Well, I don't know. I think you're setting your hopes too high for this plan. If everything falls apart, you don't have any backup. You didn't even think twice about coming to the resort with me right now. But what if she finds out? Cindy asked. Do you have some other way of explaining yourself to her? But Cindy didn't have time to say anything. The large car that had passed them on the right side slowly started to move them to the edge of the road. Sebastian became angry, backing sharply towards the vehicle, which was unknown to him, cussed pretty hard, and was so angry at the man that he wanted to sharply put him in his place. What the hell? Are you out of your mind? Can't you see what kind of car is in front of you? He said sharply, and by the fact that they didn't give way to him. Sebastian was sure that if he sat behind the wheel of an expensive car, other motorists would immediately give way to him. But the person behind the wheel of the big car didn't give a damn about him. And then, from the other side, another car appeared. Cindy, the first one, realized that all was not so clear, felt fear rising up inside her in a wave. Stop the car. Jesus, stop the car. He's going to hit us now, she said, and Sebastian hit the brakes. He sat in the car, afraid to get out of it, because he didn't know what to expect from the people who were pulling him to the curb. What if he tore toward the bridge abutment at such a high rate of speed that he didn't have time to stop? What if he'd flipped out and fallen into the river? Are you crazy? Sebastian exclaimed, finally getting out of the car, because the anger had completely cut off any common sense in him. Well, let's see who's approved here, said the stout man, getting out of the car and pulling out a rifle. He immediately raised it and pointed it at Sebastian. To say that he was dumbfounded is to say nothing. "What are you doing?" "I didn't do anything." "What's wrong?" Sebastian asked, raising his palms, unable to say a single word. He was so scared. Several other people got out of the car. They pulled Cindy out of the car, put her back against her lover's back. They tied them up, and then, without waiting a second, simply threw them into the river from the bridge. So quickly, so unexpectedly, that neither Cindy nor Sebastian even had time to beg for mercy. Everything happened literally in a matter of seconds, and they were already in the icy water. Cindy felt a blow to her side, and then as the blow spread forcefully through her body, and realized that she had probably suffered a fracture. The pain in her ribs was so intense that nausea came to her throat. Before they knew it, they were tossed into the water, before they realized how they were pulled out of there. Just under the bridge, it turned out, were several other cars and heavily armed men laughing as they pulled them out of there. "But hello to you, Sebastian, from your mom," said the man, laughing, and those around him laughed too. Sebastian, who had just been pulled out of the icy water, had no idea what was happening. A shiver ran through his whole body. When he was free of the ropes, he slumped forward, coughing, spitting water out of his lungs. Cindy was just lying on the ground, twisting around, wrapping her arms around her knees. "What the hell?" he asked, completely unaware of what was going on and barely hearing the people talking to him. You know when you find out you're being cheated on by your own kind, when you fly off in the treason of someone you love more than life. It feels like being thrown headfirst into ice water. "So I made sure you experienced it firsthand," the man said. They got into their cars and drove off, leaving Sebastian alone. Cindy was still lying there, trying not to move. Every movement hurt like hell. She remembered the pain and knew that she had probably broken a rib. She was taking breaths, but her breaths were shallow because her strength was gone and the pain was palpable. Sebastian looked at his mistress. She was lying down. It was noticeable that she was breathing, but her breathing was weak as well. He felt like he was to blame for everything that had happened. Pride hurt ego, prevented him from confessing even to himself that it was his own fault, that it was he who had miscalculated everything. "Idiot," she said. She rose slowly, clinging to the bridge abutment. Cindy looked with undisguised pain in her eyes at the upward climb ahead of her. Even a healthy person would find such a steep climb problematic. For someone with a broken rib or even ribs, it would be a nightmare. "I didn't know," she knew. "I'm not supposed to know everything. You can't put all the responsibility on me," he said, quickly, trying to absolve himself of responsibility for what had happened as soon as possible. "I hate you. I want you to die here under a bridge," Cindy said, slowly walking toward the stairs. She tried to climb, but each time it was far more painful than she felt. The pain was so intense it made her eyes darken each time. As she barely got up, she immediately saw that the car was still standing, and no one had punched their tires. "You're going to take me to the hospital and forget everything." "What's my name?" bellowed she, clearly not going to discuss anything else with him. Okay, said Sebastian. Quiet. He already knew that he could hardly ask her to forgive him, and he realized that she would never forgive him. After something like this, he should have kept his intentions better hidden. He should not have drunk to the last, so that he would not loose his tongue in front of his sister. But what's done is done. And now he was watching his mistress, who had broken ribs and was barely walking to the car. She was repeating swear words to herself, which were mixed with painful tones. "Cindy, I really thought it was going to go okay. It's not like I didn't know she knew. My mother was in on it too. But it's okay. I'm still teaching them. I'll show them. How does it feel?" he said, and she immediately gave him such a powerful slap that he was speechless. The blow was so loud that it rang in his ears. Her face was already starting to burn with flames. Scarlet marks from the palm of his hand, from his fingers, were slowly coming in on his face. Cindy looked at him with undisguised hatred. She got into the car feeling in pain, She could no longer hold back the tears. He sat behind the wheel, drove her to the hospital in complete silence, and when she was already taken away, she was put in a room. He sat in the waiting room and didn't know what to do next. Sebastian looked at his own palms. When the doctor appeared at the end of the corridor, he immediately jumped up from his seat and hurried to him. He hoped they would tell him something, because he couldn't believe that he would be left without news. He could even reassure himself. After everything that's happened, you can go to her room. I'll give you no more than 5 minutes, then leave. She needs to rest now and get a good night's sleep, the doctor said. It was clear from the look on his face that he would never have let Sebastian in willingly. Apparently, Cindy had agreed to let him into the room so they could talk. There was hope in the man's heart that she would forgive him after all that had happened. At least he could hope so. But when he entered the room, when he saw the face of his mistress, he immediately realized that it was very stupid to hope that she would forgive him. Her body was wrapped up. All those endless bandages were fixing broken ribs. And she was looking at him with hatred. And she was so angry that it was visibly hard for her to breathe. Okay, here's the deal. You and I are going to make a decision. One single question. You go away and never come back to me. Never come to my apartment. Never come to the apartment building where I live. You just forget I exist. You got me, asshole. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in this idiotic situation, Cindy said. She took a deep breath, and she looked like she was making a massive effort not to destroy him with one look. Look, it's not my fault. I may have had a drink somewhere. I may have blabbed a little. But then it's their fault. My mother decided to teach me a good lesson, I guess. My sister joined in. My wife. It's okay. I'll find the words to apologize to Kelly. She'll forgive me. I'll get the money, and everything will be back to normal. Do you believe me? He asked. I don't believe a word you say. God, you're even worse than your stupid Kelly. Cindy screamed. I played you like an idiot, and you didn't suspect a thing. I don't even want to sleep in the same room with you. I'm sick of you touching me. All I wanted was money. You're an idiot, even dumber than the people you're talking about. Get out of here. I can't stand the sight of you. Cindy screamed, even though every scream hurt like hell. But she wanted to scream, wanted to let all those emotions out, and never let him come near her again. Yes, her plan had gone awry, never ending, but at least she had let him know she didn't want to see him. Sebastian was so shocked by her confession that he just couldn't take his eyes off of her. Because she screamed. Immediately, a nurse came running in, literally pushing out a dumbfounded Sebastian, paralyzed by her words. He stood in the hallway, looking out the window at his former mistress, miserable, battered. She was lying on the bed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Apparently, she herself was having a hard time with what had happened, but she wasn't going to talk to him, and she wasn't going to pretend she wanted to be with him again. Was there really no more love on her part? Had she been deceiving him from the beginning? Sebastian was now running through these questions in his head. The only thing left was to go to his wife, to find the words to apologize. Since his mother had decided to teach him a lesson, he would not be able to go back to his mother. He had to find a place to stay, because if he didn't, he'd be left on the street with his bare ass, because he'd lost all the places that could be home to him. As he walked out of the hospital, he involuntarily looked around again. He couldn't believe that she didn't want to listen to him, that she didn't want to talk to him, and that she had turned out to be just another girl to him who only wanted money from him. The whole time he was divorcing Kelly, he didn't even realize that Cindy was divorcing him in return. Sebastian got into the same expensive car, already realizing that when he came to his wife, the car would be taken away. But there was no way out. He had to go to his wife, to talk to her, to persuade her to forgive him. Forgiveness wouldn't be easy, but he hoped Kelly still loved him. He would fall to his knees in front of her, beg for forgiveness, hoping that the remnants of feeling in her heart would help her forgive him. Sebastian craved the beautiful life, craved it so much that he was even willing to give up his mistress, all mistresses. Never would he even look at another woman, just to stay in this good, secured life. But he could not even imagine that he had no chance in front of his wife. When he arrived, Kelly was already waiting for him. She was standing near the gate of the house. There were bags and bags of his clothes. She hadn't even bothered to put it all in her suitcase. She didn't think he deserved it. And besides, it was too much of an honor to fold his things. "Kelly, please. I'm sorry," he begged, falling to his knees in front of her as he wiped his new sweatpants on the pavement. He was literally crawling on his knees to her. He didn't care about pride. He didn't care about ego. He had to beg her forgiveness because he couldn't do it any other way. He hated himself in that second, hated her, hated everyone involved. "Please, Kelly, I'm sorry. I was a complete idiot. I'm the last person. Please forgive me." She looked at him with absolutely no emotion, as if he was a stranger to her. And he knew what that meant. No forgiveness he deserved. Immediately, all the situations that had happened between them and all the time she had spent with him came to mind. And she really did love him. And no one could say that anyone had ever loved him like that. It was only now that he realized it wasn't just the money he'd lost. Most importantly, he'd lost someone who loved him. Maybe no one would ever love him again in this life. These thoughts were so heavy that he couldn't even cope with them. He cried and tears flowed down his cheeks. But even these emotions did not touch her in any way. "You said you were only disabled for money, didn't you? Hid me from my sister's mother. Afraid they'd find out about your plan and get you out quickly?" Kelly asked, in a calm, reserved tone. And he realized that there was no way he could get her to go with him. She didn't say anything. And as long as the silence lasted, he wanted to do anything to make her forgive him. But what she said next crushed him completely. "My mother-in-law, your mother overheard you talking to your mistress, and it was she who decided to teach you a beautiful lesson, for which I am eternally grateful. You know, I want you to get out of here. I hope I never see you again. The divorce will be handled by a trustee. And you, Kelly, you're silent, your head slightly raised, as if you were trying to support yourself with that proud Sue. And you won't even get a job here anymore. No one will even take you on as a live loader. You got me." She walked away into the yard, closing the high gate behind her, where he would never have access to again. He begged her to forgive him, but she wouldn't. The only thing left to do was to walk away, leaving her here alone. He threw his things into the car, looked at his car, which was vastly inferior to her father's car, which all along had been so much to his liking, so attractive. Only early this morning, he thought about how everything was going perfectly. He stood in front of the mirror, smiling, happy that everything was going according to plan. There was a jubilant carnival in his head. As he was sure that this whole plan was going perfectly, he thought that all the difficulties were over. But life had prepared a very different gift for him. "All right, everything will get better," he said to himself, although he did not even understand the meaning of these words. He felt resentful of himself and how stupid he had been. If he hadn't screwed up so badly, he could have had a very different future. What did he have in store for him now? Sebastian drove in his mother's direction. Even if she did it, he would forgive her. She would accept him. He would live with his mother for the first time. While his mother helped him with his job and money, he would feel more or less okay. Then he'll try to talk to his wife again. Maybe even before the divorce, he'll be able to convince her. He would be the perfect husband. He would show her that there could be a very different life, and he was sure that she would forgive him and realize that everything would be perfect. When Sebastian arrived at his mother's house, he was afraid that she wouldn't be there either, that she would behave exactly like Kelly. But everything seemed fine. "Tell me honestly, did you set this up?" Sebastian asked. He looked just awful. He must have forgotten what he'd been through in the rush of emotion. He had been thrown into the icy river, dragged back to the shore, and now he was standing in front of his mother covered in clay and mud. "I heard you talking with your mistress and decided to teach you a beautiful lesson. When your father cheated on me, I felt as if I had just been thrown into icy water. I was carried by the current. I didn't have the strength to get out. I wanted you to understand what it felt like, my mother said. He heard her at the same time, and at the same time her words came out as if from a distance. It was as if she had been somewhere else in the room the whole time. He couldn't believe that his own mother could do such a cruel thing to him, and heard your conversation with your lover, wrote down her number, copied her picture, and sent it to Nika. And she had already found her. I took the evidence to Kelly, and together we put the plan into action. But now you know what it can be like. It will be a lesson to you, and you will realize that you should never play with the feelings of living people, the mother said. Miranda stood in front of her son and was not going to say anything more to him. He couldn't look at her without tears. He realized how screwed up he was, and what hurt the most was that this situation could have easily been avoided. He should have stayed at his friend's house after all that drinking. He should have at least not blabbed to his sister, just gone straight to bed. And that was it. None of this would have arisen. He shouldn't have talked to his mistress on the phone while at his mother's house. He was an idiot himself for doing such a stupid thing. So now he had to deal with the consequences of his own stupidity. Didn't you feel sorry for me? Don't you realize you've disfigured my whole life? Her father won't get me a job anywhere now. I'll just be the last person to work with some cashier. Jesus, Mom, do you realize what you've done? He asked, looking into her eyes. His mother looked at him, but there was no emotion in her, no regret that he had expected. She clearly didn't regret what she had done. He looked at his own mother, and everything inside clenched at the thought that she had betrayed him and now had no regrets. He stepped into the apartment, but his mother immediately stood across the aisle. He stared at his mother and didn't understand why she wouldn't let him in now. Yes, after all she had done, she should have been grateful that he had dared to come to her instead of cursing her for the rest of his life. Sebastian was terribly angry with her, and so much anger that it literally overwhelmed him. You should be glad I decided to forgive you at all. And you pretend you're still the cool mom who, you see, put me in my place. He resented that, wanting a response from his mother. You know, when I first found out, I was very hesitant to set up this revenge plan, said the mother. You are my son, but I didn't raise you like this. You acted as if all these values I instilled in you meant absolutely nothing to you. And if my upbringing and the values I instilled in you meant nothing to you, then I mean nothing to you.